Everybody
Mine.
can go on mute. And remember, I know Jess already told you, if you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute.
Okay, how do I
I'm
make me
better.
bigger? Wait a minute, I need to be bigger so I can get to the mute button. My goodness. How do I do this? Maybe I'll turn it sideways.
And we're
Nope.
live.
Hi, everybody. My name is A.M. Griffin, and I am here with POC Authors. And if you don't know what that means it's people of color. So we are here and we are talking about fantasy, which includes urban fantasy. And we are just going to introduce ourselves, have a great conversation. I'll ask them some questions. It'll be a lot of laughs. And I'm just going to have everybody introduce themselves. Let's start with Jessica, since you're like in the top left of my corner. Jessica Cage, go ahead.
Oh, no pressure. Hi, I am Jessica Cage. I am from Chicago and I write urban fantasy and dystopian novels. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Leslie,
Hey, I am Leslie. I write as Penelope. I write epic fantasy and paranormal romance primarily.
great. TJ, you got to take
Oh,
yourself.
hi. Hi, I'm T.A. Moorman. I write mostly paranormal, dark fantasy, all that good kind of stuff. This is my first time doing this. So if you hear any screaming in the background, the kids are not being abused. They're just crazy.
TJ Michaels,
Good morning, everyone. This is TJ Michaels in Hawaii. I'm a New York Times and USA Today bestseller of urban fantasy, contemporary BDSM, sci-fi, and paranormal romance. And I'm sporting my women of color in a romance shirt because I'm representing. Hey, y'all.
woo woo. And I'm so jealous that you're in Hawaii.
Girl, it's 6 in the morning. Don't be jealous. I ain't had no coffee either. Lord help you all.
Stella,
Hello, everybody. I am Stella Williams. I am an urban fantasy, paranormal romance author. And it's my book, since we're holding stuff up, Ferocious. uh, and I also do reviews of sci-fi, fantasy, and paranormal books.
and for everybody who doesn't know, we have the POC Paranormal Sci-Fi and Fantasy group that I run. We have a book club and we read Ferocious. Was that our first book that we read, or I think that was the
Yes.
first book that we read. Yeah. So
Yeah.
very,
I
very
have
good book.
Jessica Cage's Siren next. I'm so excited about that.
Yeah. So we're doing Jessica K. Siren next. So okay, so getting to my first question. What inspired you to write fantasy? Was it that you read a book or you saw a movie? What brought you there? And I'll just let whoever wants to start. Just make sure if you're not talking, put yourself on mute, but go ahead.
Well, for me, I started with historicals like a million years ago. Okay. I turned 52 2 days ago. Hey, everybody. Anyway, so I mean, like a long time ago, like 30 years, 35 years when I first started reading. And even the historicals had a little touch of fantasy in it, mostly because some of the things that I was reading were ridiculous. Not so much elves and stuff, but just ridiculous. But I still loved it. And I read a book by Heather Graham. Oh my God, like 25 years ago. And it had a mix of fantasy and science fiction together. And as I was reading it and getting pulled into the world, I was like, I could write this. I know I could write this. And it just had me going. But at the time, my kids were really little. So I raised my kids, established my career and all that kind of stuff. I'm one of those day job writers. And when my kids got a little older, my son walked into my room and said, "What are you going to do with that big book you wrote when I was, really, really little? Are you going to ever do anything with that?" Just out of the blue. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to go back, revisit that book, rewrite it. I ended up writing something completely different. And from there, it was me and fantasy and urban fantasy. And then what really did it was when I met LA Banks. I met LA Banks at a RT one year. And I sat down, I got to have lunch with her and listen to her stories about her family and the things that inspired her to put into her books and where her ideas came from and all that kind of thing. And I was hooked. Unfortunately, about 4 months later, she left us. Um, so I'll never forget that final meeting that I got to have with her, and that her energy and the things that she said to me, because she was just real. It didn't matter where she was or who she was talking to. She was just real, and she might throw in a "oh Jesus" on you, you know. And that kind of colors my fantasy writing, that energy. So that's how I got into it, a long time ago with Heather Graham, all the way up to you know LA Banks, and all of those things combined. I just, plus little bits of my life, and all the crazy that I deal with on the day job. I'll tell you about that sometime. That's my fantasy world, for lack of better words. It kind of keeps me going. Worlds spin, so those things keep me going. And fantasy, you can do whatever you want. So I love it. I don't have to be in somebody's box. Mutant now.
For me, I'll go next. Fantasy has been in my life since I was a little girl, inspired by my mother, who loved, loved, loved all things sci-fi fantasy. We had sci-fi Saturdays in our house where we would just sit in front of the TV and watch all types of alien, vampire, whatever movies. And that would be our day. And then my love of books came from my grandmother, who had she was the first book nerd I ever knew. We had a floor to ceiling, wall length bookcase full of books. And most of the books I was not supposed to be reading, but she let me read anyway. And my mother was not happy with that. And my grandmother's response was, she gonna read it someday. She might as well read it at home. So that's where my love of books and fantasy came, and it just kind of fused into my life over the years. And I got into writing. I was very much content with my profession of being in business management, which is what I still currently do for my day job. But I was pregnant, and I just kept asking myself, like, how am I going to inspire my son to grow and to be something amazing when he grows up? How do I tell him, follow your dreams? And I'm sitting here with this big dream of my own and doing nothing with it. So I wrote my first book while I was pregnant. I was on bed rest because I was high risk. So 9 months of pain inspired my first book, which was about vampires from another realm. So they weren't us, they were aliens. So it's just a blend of all of my mother and my grandmother in one book. And that's what got me going 10 years ago. So it's been an interesting journey. I'm going to mute now.
I can go next because I think my parents were influential too. Like my mom loved Twilight Zone. That's her favorite TV show. And so I grew up watching all these Twilight Zone episodes. And my father and I would stay up really late to watch Doctor Who. Because back in the day, the original Doctor Who's would come on at 1 a.m. or midnight on PBS. And so my father would just let me stay up as late as I wanted. And we would watch that together. And that was kind of one of the things that we did. And I always read a lot. And then in college, someone gave me Wild Seed by Octavia Butler. And then I decided I discovered Black science fiction, and I started trying to read as much Black sci-fi and fantasy as I could. In the early 2000s, they had this event called Black to the Future in Seattle. And I was living in Maryland, and it was Octavia Butler, Genevieve Dew, Stephen Barnes, Narlo Hopkinson, just all of these luminaries. So I saved up my money and I flew to Seattle to go to this event. And I'd always written, but it was really inspiring to meet these people whose books I loved. And so finally, I never thought I could write a novel. It just didn't make any sense to me. I always wrote short stories and poetry, but I had gone to these writers' workshops, and I had an idea that was longer, and all of the ideas always had some kind of magic in them. And I just started writing, and I finished something that was long enough to be a novel. And then I decided to self-publish it. And so, yeah, that's kind of the journey of unexpected. Like, I didn't plan to write a novel necessarily. I just kept writing, and it got a little bit longer than I thought it was going to.
I guess I'll go next. Um, I was also influenced by my parents a lot. My dad was all in for, Star Wars and creature features. And then my mom was all about, Star Trek and Farscape and all of that. And she was also an avid romance reader. I'm talking like every week we would go down to the store and buy the entire shelf of Harlequins. And they would be done by like the next day. So I started out writing romance, and then in my teens, um, I was a huge Aaliyah fan, and her role in Queen of the Damned really just spoke to me. And I was so mad that, her being the romantic that I am, I was so mad that the way her character kind of ended. But and that kind of inspired me to start writing vampire fiction. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of how I fell into the urban fantasy, vampire, paranormal romance realm. Um, I'm a big scaredy cat, so I could never make it through an actual like Anne Rice book or anything like that. I have too much of an active imagination for that. But yeah, I have a lot of different like influences, but that's one that really stands out as far as my first experience with Black and POC representation in vampire fiction.
I guess I'll go next while she's still quiet. I also did read L.A. Banks. I got an email from her a few years ago, which I saved since I know she passed away. She was a big inspiration because I used to read like Anne Rice, Watch Dark Shadows, Dracula, Twilight Zone, all that good stuff. Um, but when I finally found L.A. Banks, it was like a whole book with people of color. It was like not just one person here or one victim there or something like that. So it was a maybe about 3 years ago when I wrote my first novel. What happened was I ended up losing my job and everything, and wasn't doing anything else. And then NaNoWriMo came up, and I decided to go ahead and try for it, and end up writing the whole book, and been going ever since there. So
Well, thank you, everybody. So my next question is, um, how do you come up with your world and your character, your fantasy world and your characters? Like, what inspire you? And I know that some of you, have a lot of books and maybe a lot of worlds, but you can just pick one if you want, or your latest. How do you come up with them? Like, I just want to know, what was the inspiration behind this world, because it takes a lot to write a fantasy world. We all know that. So what was your process? How did you come up with it?
I use a lot of mythology, to be honest. I'm a Lakota Sioux, Blackfeet, and Choctaw on my mom's side of the family, and West Indian Black on my dad's side of the family, or at least that's what we are told, because a lot of my family has passed on, and taking some of the mythology of Native American culture, Black American culture, and growing up in the city. I was born in San Francisco. Um, and then adding to that my area of expertise. I'm in biotech and pharma. So for my vampire series, the thought, and I'm not knocking anybody else's preference for their vampire stuff, but the thought of getting it with somebody that's dead, I couldn't handle it. I'm like, oh, that's squicky. I can't do the dead man thing. I'm good. Nah. So because my background is science, I mixed in science with it. So my vampires aren't dead. So then that meant I had to write a world that explained, well, how are they around so long if they're actually not dead? So then that allowed me to get into like DNA and all this other kind of stuff. So the vampire series is written in the modern world today with a lot of science thrown in to explain, where they came from. And then I have another series where somebody mentioned aliens. Like,
You got to name these series, TJ, so
oh,
people
I'm
can
sorry. See, thank
so
you. I
people
need to
can
thank
go
you.
and get them if they want to.
It's the Vampire Council of Ethics is my vampire series because I have a bunch of other stuff out there. Pride Ranch Shifters series is all African lion females. It's a matriarchy, and there's several sets of twins in there, and they run a straight up empire right here in the United States, but they don't tell all their business, so you don't really know what they're getting up to unless you are in their world. So by day, they're scientists. By night, they're bounty hunters tracking down the bad guys. So I do tend to mix in a lot of biotech and science and stuff like that. Experiences with my mom, riding down the streets of San Francisco could even get tossed in there because she was a nurse. So everything was clinical at my house growing up. And so I tend to mix those kinds of things into the world, add in my cultural stuff to give it a bit more validity, I guess. Because even though it's fantasy, I still want it to be relatable. So I do put in, Black culture and my Native American culture. I kind of sprinkle that in there without saying that's what it is. Um, so that's where I get a lot of my ideas is in biotech and pharma. I work with people who some of them are awesome, but some of them you would swear that the sun don't rise until they open their eyes. So I tend to write them into some of the crazier roles. Girl, I have some X's thrown in there. My ex-husband is in some of those books as the hero, and depending on what day it was in some of those books, he's not the hero. So I take my life around me and use those things to create my worlds and sprinkle the fantasy in there so that it's an adventure for you. If you took all the sex out of my Vampire Council of Ethics series or my Pride Ranch Shifter series or any of the other ones, if you took all the sex out and all the romance out, you're still going to have a hell of a plot. Because if you think about it, as we go about our lives every day, there's always something going on, something awesome and something, am I allowed to cuss on here? Shitty. Okay. There's a mix of all of that all the time. So I'm like, let's escape into some of these worlds, but we have to sprinkle a little bit of reality in there so people can relate. That's where I come up with my ideas. Work and life.
My ideas are, I don't know if they come to me in a technical fashion. I have dreams pretty much. And then so I feel like stories are energy that pass from person to person. And while you have that energy with you, if you don't write it, it moves on to the next person. Um, so I capture these powerful bursts of energy in moments, usually when I'm asleep or riding on a train and just not even thinking about writing. And then I get hit with this idea. And it's usually just one character that comes to me like really strong. And then I always tell people I feel like I'm this person, like I'm a recorder. I'm walking around following this person like a stalker through their life, and I'm just writing down what's happening. And then I write their story, and then I'm like, okay, well, I know what you're about, but like, what else? You know what I mean? And then I start to build and flesh out the world. The world I'm living in now is my Gen Rebellion series, and this burst of energy first came to me when I was about 9, and I've been like toying with it for literally, I don't want to say how old I am, that many years. Um, and it was based on the genie from Aladdin. I didn't care. I mean, Aladdin was hot, whatever. I had a crush on him, but I really wondered what happens to the genie. Like, he's immortal. Aladdin gonna die. Like, is he gonna grant wishes for the rest of his life? Like, what happens? So years and years and years later, I'm like, you know what? I have to write this story before I forget it, and I'm going to be so mad at myself when I do. And it's set in a post-apocalyptic Earth, 300 years into the future. Humans are gone. Okay. I want to see. I always wanted to see a story that was about the fantasy creatures, where they're not like, guided by some weakling human. Like we're cool and all, but come on, like he's a genie, she's a vampire, she's a phoenix. Like, what do we really bring to the table? But like aches and pains and stuff. Like my knees hurt. Can we slow down? So I wanted to create a world where the powerful beings, like they took it out. They had a war with the humans. Humans, started throwing bombs around like we want our planet, and then they lost. And so I get to build this fresh new world that still has a lot of the flaws. So what I wanted to keep was that they're magical, they're powerful, but they're not perfect. And there's still a lot of flaws and a lot of social, economic, just cultural issues that they're dealing with that they thought, because we're like, super powerful badasses, that we wouldn't have to deal with. But it still ties into what we're going through in our, modern life, because we can relate to, certain species not being treated, fairly just because of how they look. You know what I mean? So those issues that they thought that they were so far above are still present in their world. So once I figured out my main character, who is Jen, once I figured him out, I was like, okay, now I got to build this world around him that's full of relatable characters and, stories that modern day, human beings can relate to, because there aren't any humans running around. So I still want people to care about these people, And another thing is, all of my books, so I have 20 something books out now with 5 series, and they all connect. And I love that, because my readers come to me with like, this character was in this book and this thing and that. And I never intended for it to be that way. I was about 15 books in until another reader came to me and started pointing out that all of my worlds were connecting by either one character or one scene. And I was like, oh, look at that. So I'm like, apparently there's this like complete universe just living inside my head, and I'm just jumping from plane to plane.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so that's my world building experience. It's more energy than, me actually deciding on what's going to happen.
I do that too. I have actually did it consciously though, to have like a multiverse. So each series takes place in a different place, but there's connections between them, and there's similar types of energy. And they have an origin story that I haven't written yet, but that's like one of the next books for all of the different worlds in the multiverse. But usually, like, world building comes for me, like the first thing I get is an idea, a premise. So not even necessarily a character, but like for my angel boy. And then what is the world around that? Well, why is he invisible? What kind of creatures are they? All of that comes out of that. And so that's a paranormal romance series. So it's our world, but there's angels and there's Jinn. And there's this origin story of how the angels got here, because there's a different version of angels, and they have their own sphere where they live, and then they influence humans. And one of the other questions I was thinking about was like, people who have powers. Okay, what if they are descendants of angels? So they have that magic in them. They don't know it though, if they're human born, if they're basically like the human born descendants of angels. So there's these questions that come into my head, and the world is just like a natural result of answering those questions in different ways. I actually had that question about what if a girl fell in love with an invisible boy, and I've tried different books. Like there's an unfinished book that was one of the first novels I tried to write that I have never been able to finish, but it was just a completely different world starting from that same seed of an idea. So sometimes I like the idea so much that I don't feel like I've gotten it quite right. So I'll just take it in a totally different direction with totally different creatures. And then the Earthsinger Chronicle series, which is my epic fantasy series, I had this character, these two characters, the hero and the heroine. And I knew that they were star-crossed lovers. They were on different sides of this war. And so then the world came about because I was trying to answer the question, well, why are these countries at war? What are their differences? Why don't they like each other? What's keeping them apart? And then I came up with, all of the geography and the politics and the history and the magic as a way to answer those questions. And so it all just kind of comes organically. And I do plot, but I still like discover a lot of things along the way as I'm plotting. And so it's layers. It's like, well, I know enough to start writing. And then when I have another question about something like the economics or where are they getting their, metal from or something like that, I stop and then I answer that question and then I keep going. So it just kind of layers on top of each other until I have a full world that feels alive and lived in.
Also, I'm like Jessica, where things just kind of come to me. And if I don't like make a note of it or write it down, it just disappears. And sometimes it comes back, sometimes it doesn't. So I have to make a conscious effort to choose which stories that I actually put down to write. Because not all of them are gold, and even the ones that are gold still need to be polished immensely. My first series, my Mora's Men series, which I had a cover redone for it, but it's a vampire paranormal romance, and the first book, Xander's Claim, is an interracial romance. And what inspired me for that book was that in my reading of paranormal romance, like there was no representation of African Americans unless they were bad guys, from what I read in like the mainstream. So I was like, I got together with my sisters. We're all avid readers, my entire family. So we are constantly, we're our own little book club per se. And just, I came up with this idea and I kind of brainstormed it with my sisters. And what for me makes that my first series kind of unique is that even though my villain isn't actually a villain once you get her backstory. She was just someone who was like us, tired of being beaten down, tired of being, used, abused for what was her power and her strength. And she fought back, and that made her a villain to this homogenous society. And therefore, the people she spawned were also these villains. But, and this was like years ago. Uh, so, I mean, now you see more of this, but yeah, I had a lot of different things going that with that series, as far as having the female characters be more of the driving force and the main character versus and more of an agent in the story than say just being like the damsel in distress that the hot vampire guy comes and saves. And even with that series, I did catch a little bit of flack for not having as much diversity as I could. So when I came back with my second series, which is the Secret of Sarah series with Ferocious, I was like, oh, I don't have enough diversity for you. Let me let me come at you with what's really on my brain.
Okay, I'm sorry. Somebody said with your diverse, inclusive book that you didn't have enough diversity in your
Yeah,
book.
they were saying my books weren't Black enough. So I was like, all right, you want me to be Black? I'm gonna be Black and Black. So I came out with Secret of Sarah's, and it's like a 90% Black cast. I have a gorgeous Black, vibrant cover models on
TJ,
my
yeah,
stuff. Look, I have Ferocious. She has her gorgeous afro. And then I have Dauntless out right now, where she's serving you boss lady, everything. I was like, you're not going to come at me with this. You're not
Stella,
writing Black enough.
Okay, I'm
Stella,
sorry. I know I'm looking crazy right now, but it's because I remember when Black in romance just didn't exist at all. If you weren't Brenda Jackson or Beverly Jenkins, it wasn't happening. I mean, I didn't even discover that there was such a thing as interracial romance, which is when I started writing it, until like 2004. And people are, my mind is blown. I'm just like, "Wait, what? Not black enough? How about black at all?" I mean, this is one of those industries where there's some straight up gatekeeping, and it's hard to even to get in at all. I mean, being traditionally published, I'm indie published now, but I started out traditionally published, and girl, it was hard just to get a black character in a book, let alone two, three, four, or most of the cast. So mind blown. I'm muting myself now because I'm over here tripping.
So Secret of Ceres is a celebration of Black in a very non-monolithic way. All of my characters are different and nuanced, and they have their own themes and ideas. And you have your conservatives, you have your liberals, you have your radicals. And even though I write it in a very fun, kind of escapist way, I do touch on a lot of issues affecting the Black community, like the trafficking of women, the issues with the policing of Black bodies, just a lot of things. But I also believe that Black people deserve escapism. We don't always need trauma all the time. And that's the whole purpose of fantasy, is to give us that escape. So even though I touch on these very heavy topics in my books, the idea behind it is to allow you to process it in a way that's not going to cause you further trauma and anxiety. So, but yeah, so my first book was just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna write a book and it's gonna be fun and it's gonna be full of vampires and greatness and urban fantasy romance. And then my second one was like, oh, apparently I have to have, more going on. So I'm going to give you everything. And they're all connected. So it's.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and ask TA Man to give her answer, because we have a reader question that I want to get to.
Yes.
Okay, when I started Underlays, it was a lot of questioning in my life right at that time, like, about God and, pagan cultures and everything else. So Underlays was pretty much how it was God, and he made humans and everything like that, but he also had underling gods that helped him out with everything else. And they were allowed to make their own creatures. You had Nyx that made the vampires, Aphrodite made sirens, and all things like that, combined everything into the Underlay series. And they got their own realm and everything, so they got tired of dealing with humans trying to kill them. But they do come back and forth to the human realm every now and then. It's mainly about three sisters, but the three sisters are not white. They are witches, though. Two of them are twins. They half vampire, half witch. Then they got a third sister who's just a witch. But then it branched off from them. Like I said, it's got vampires, witches, necromancers, pretty much everything you could think of. Now I did deal with that not black enough thing, but it was different. My Not So Wicked is the YA part of Underlays. And I had them dealing with racism and everything in there because they were time traveling into Detroit during the time of the riots and everything. And I actually had some of a reviewer complain that it wasn't enough racism in it. It wasn't enough violence. It wasn't enough this. It should have been that way. It's like racism comes in different kind of ways. I had her sit there and she killed one of the racist cops, and so I'm like, how is this not racist enough for you? But hey, I'm sorry, my bad. They dealt with other things besides just racism. So people are strange. Anyway, but yeah, the book I'm working on right now, Lady Killers, that's coming out next month. I actually was going to have a normal serial killer book. I lasted about one chapter before the end of the chapter. She ended up being a witch. So they're still serial killers, but they're just not human and they're female. So it's a bit different, and it is actually tied to underlays too. Her mother was kicked out of underlays, but so we get. But like I said, all my stuff is different. It but they're not all in the underlay series. And I write the books where you can write each one you can read by itself. You don't have to actually keep up with the thing like that. But it's more fun when you read it from book one.
Okay, so just before we move on to the next question, we are writers, and I think that when we put our stuff out there, there's going to be reviewers who don't like something of our book, or think we should have done something different, think it should have been more black, think if it's think that it maybe it's too black. But as an author, these are our creations. And so I think I started writing in 2012. So, you would get the gambit, but what it comes down to is I write for me. So if you if you don't like something I write, you know, I'm sorry, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'm sure you do have somebody who is your cup of tea, but I write for me. So, and it's really hard to, when people are like trying to pick you apart, it's really hard to get you know, that thick skin about you. But I think being who we are, we're Black women. We have to be true to ourselves. If we aren't true to ourselves, then who are we going to be true to? We can't be true to every reviewer, every person who leaves an Amazon, comment. We have to be true to ourselves, and that's
Say
what it is.
that.
And that's how I feel about I do, like, sometimes I read reviews, not all the time, and I'm like, oh, they like this character, oh, they didn't like this character, blah blah. But and sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, she is a bitch, just like, maybe I should unbitch her a little bit, but but as far as our character, who we are, and our blackness, you know I've written books with everybody's black. I've written books where, maybe one person is black, somebody's Asian. It just depends on where my creative flow is coming from. And I don't want us to ever feel like we are held under to whatever someone else's thinks that we should be writing about. So that was my little spiel about it.
Amen. I'm
Listen,
there with you. I'm
just to
there.
clarify, it wasn't that I
Oh
wrote
no,
this
no,
book
it
because of
no,
that comment.
no, no,
It was
it
more like
wasn't. No,
I
it
had
it was
something on the shelf already that I planned to write.
no,
So when
it's not.
I got that comment, I was
It's
like,
not that
oh,
you wrote the book how you wanted to write the book. I'm just
There
saying,
you go.
you know, I'm just saying that, when people say, "Oh, it's not black enough." I mean, I think we've all heard that, it's not black enough. And you're like, "Well, the way my mind is set up, this person was Asian." This way, So that's where it is. Um, and I had somebody before who said, so in one of my books, it's a shifter story. The wolf is a white guy, and the heroine is a wannabe vampire, but she's human, but she's black. And they were like, "Well, you didn't address any racism in this book." And I was like,
Why
he
would you
is
have
a
to?
right, one, why would I have to? And two, he is a wolf. Like, he's a wolf shifter. He's got bigger things on his mind than about the color of somebody's skin. He is like shifting. Like, that is like a different plane. So that's why it's not. And you just people will nitpick and find something in anything, like how you should have did it. Well, you address a book about a wolf shifter who's dealing with racism. Let that be your project. And so that's how I feel about that. Okay, so going up, so we have a reader question. This is from Wow Girl. She says, if you could collaborate on a book with your favorite author, who would it be?
Nalini Singh, girl. Woo! Nalini Singh. I mean, I saw some of the other answers in the chat, and definitely yes to those. But Nalini, she is she's so her worlds are so big that I could totally see myself writing some of my characters into it without having to change any of her world at all, because it's
Yeah.
huge, you know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
yeah, that would be my person right there.
Okay. TA, who would be yours?
Well, Laurel K. Hamilton, but mainly Krusty Cole, because she doesn't make her characters when they a villain, they stay a villain. Just because they fall in love, they ain't gotta become somebody else or anything like that. That's how mad people is too. You gonna be who you gonna be? Love me for me or don't love me at all? Happen to somebody else. But that would be my number one.
Okay, Leslie.
I I'm gonna say Lainey Taylor because I feel like not that I feel like I'm anywhere at her level, but I would grow so much if I was able to write with her. I think she's amazing, and I think that would just push me to try to just get a lot better because she's fantastic.
Stella.
I would have to say Beverly Jenkins, just because her level of research is amazing. And I am notorious for rewriting scenes just so I don't have to research. So, another perk of fantasy is like as long as it's mildly grounded in reality, you can get away with it. Um, but but yes,
I
if
love you
I
guys. I'm just saying. I love y'all.
it would be Beverly Jenkins so that I can get some of that research mojo because I'm the first one to tell you I am a lazy writer when it comes to researching, plotting, outlining, and it's something I need to work on for my own professional growth.
And that's why I tell people I write sci-fi because it's whatever's in my head. I don't have to like research too much. Like I can just think of it. This is how it works in this world. So that's why I like it. Sci-fi and fantasy. Jessica.
I would say someone who's actually new to me, N.K. Jemisin. I had never read her work until early or late last year, and I started with the fifth season. And I'm like, if I could just get inside her head for like 5 minutes and just understand her process, I would be so happy. Plus, she has this amazing presence online that is just refreshing to see from a POC author. I don't think I see as much activity, especially on Twitter. I'm following her now. I get all the alerts when she posts and I'm retweeting and everything. But I would love to be just in the room with her for like 10 minutes just to pick her brain.
Okay. Okay. So what is your what are you working on now? And like just tell us a little bit about the heroine, the hero, what you have now. If we can try to, we're almost out of time, but if we just try to keep our answers to 2 minutes. So go ahead, start. Let the people know.
Okay,
Y'all gonna make me go
Well,
first.
I'll start.
Okay.
I'll
Thank
go.
you, Jessica.
Since
you
I get
go.
on the spot. I am currently working on the seventh book to my Gem Rebellion series. This is a world I'm like rooted in. I'm gonna hold up my cover and be like Stella. Um, like
Woo! And I love your covers. They are
Thank
so great.
you. So the series is about, like I said earlier, a group of Jinn that are set 300 years in the future. And the seventh book is when everything goes on. So the first six, we've been following the story. It's been growing. You've been getting to the real meat, and I really focus on individual characters and how they came to be a part of this world. So book six, everything explodes, and book seven, there's a magical baby, some demons, the devil. It's a lot going on. And I'm really up in there right now.
All I have to say as a reader of Jessica's work is when is they all gonna die? Like, when is he gonna die? That's all I gotta say.
I keep getting that question, and I can't get no spoilers. You just gotta keep reading.
Who's next?
I've been talking my head off. Somebody else go. I actually have two new series in the works. One is a sci-fi fantasy, and the other is a paranormal fantasy. where we've got a sister who is half fae, half human, and she actually does not live on this realm. When she was younger, she went through some things and she told her parents, screw this earth place, let's go to grandma's house. And grandma is a fae. She does not live on this plane. So she hops back and forth between this plane and her fae realm, to deliver her goods, because she is one of the most sought after blacksmiths on earth. So she discovers that her mundane life is about to be upended because she has to go out on this hunt for all of these relics because the Fey magic is failing. And then we learn that the Fey magic is not just on their realm, but it affects every other realm that it's attached to. Kind of like the Avengers when we first met Thor, and he's like, "Well, there's the big tree, and it reaches out to all these realms and stuff, and things that are affected over there actually are manifested over here. That
I
kind of
love how
thing."
you gave Thor like a cowboy voice.
Like, yeah.
Exactly.
So you're the Chronicle, not just her father and her father's father, etc. So she's the first Fae female who actually is what we call anti-magic. It doesn't mean she doesn't have magic, but she's resistant to it. So people learn that they try to do stuff to her. They always thought she was a freak. It turns out she's one of the strongest Fae out there because she can resist just about anything. So there are Jinn in the story. So awesome that you mentioned Jinn. There are Chimera in the story. I play World of Warcraft, so I had to pull a little bit of that stuff in there. I play Star Wars: The Old Republic, so I had to pull a little bit of that stuff in there. So that's the series I'm working on. The sci-fi series is a little bit more in the baby work, so I'll leave that for another time.
Well, the book I'm working on, I was talking about earlier, Lady Killer, and it's actually also part of a shared world series with other authors. It starts June 1st. Each day it'll be another book coming out, and they're all themed with candy. So that's why the book will have a jelly bean candy shop, but it's more than just candy going on in there. One sub basement has dead bodies, to make the candy and stuff, vampires, some bloody jelly beans and all that good stuff. Then you got another basement
Lord.
with a trainer, but there is candy involved. Now, I can't talk for the rest of the books coming out, but some of them have some bloody candy in theirs too. But every day of the month is a different book that's coming out with a candy thing. We did the same thing like last year for National Ice Cream Month. So it's fun. You should do it sometime.
Look, can I be on the review team for that? Just
Girl, right here.
Just even send them to you.
Stella, you want to go next?
Sure. So I am the two main projects I'm working on right now are the last two books in my Secret of Sarah series. I am not a marathon series person like Jessica with her 11 million books. I struggle to make it a series and not a trilogy sometimes. But yes, so the third book in the Secret of Sarah series is going to be out in like winter this year, and it follows Enora, who is a medical examiner who is she's very kind of like conservative and to herself, because her magic deals with death and spirits, and helping them to cross over. So she doesn't really like to deal with people because she's always dealing with people kind of thing, like in her head. But it's a paranormal romance series mostly. So her love interest is Jacques, who is kind of a fuckboy. But you know, but that's like the romance plot is like her being super conservative and taking him for who he is, and like, you know what, it's okay if you want to be a fuckboy because I just need some release. But then, feelings get involved. Uh, but but the fantasy plot of it is furthering the story of Ceres, because in my series, Ceres is this magical sanctuary for the aura, who are a type of witches that during the witch hunts, instead of dealing with everybody else's shenanigans, we're like, look, we're going to join together, create our own little world where we're safe and we can thrive. But it was meant to be temporary. And so it's dealing with, and there's also some like political intrigue going on with the governing of Ceres itself. So you're dealing with everyone inside of the bubble of Ceres, and then you're dealing with the outside forces of Ceres and how they're managing all of that. So it's really layered, and I'm really excited to get this third book out and to get more progress done with the fourth book, which is obviously going to be their the fourth book is entitled Zenith, and I feel like that's all that should tell you what that book is going to kind of be like, it being like the end book.
Thank you. TA? TA, are you there?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Tell us what you're working on.
I did.
You already went? Did we get
I
everybody?
sure did.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I
Okay.
went.
Oh, Leslie. Leslie. Okay.
So I am both working on the last novella in my Earthsinger Chronicle series, which takes place 500 years before the main storyline. But you'll see this character in the fourth book, which is the last novel. So I have novellas in between I have novellas in between the novels, and she is a blood magician who has been adopted into this community. And the love story is between her and the son of the chief of the community, who is supposed to be a blood magician, but he's actually has a phobia of blood. And so she has to sort of Cyrano de Bergerac him, like pretend to do his magic for him in order to protect the community. And that is going to be coming out this fall in an anthology called Under a Winter Sky. And I'm just started a new series that has dragons, and it's a portal fantasy with all kinds of warring shifters. And so I'm at the early stages of that, and I have no idea when that would come out.
Thank you all. We have another question. What do you do to do deep research? Ask a friend for help? I know for me, I'm always bugging somebody.
Yeah. I actually read a lot. That's kind of how I fell into being a reviewer. Because you can take classes and you can do research, which is all well and good, but getting out of your own head is honestly the best way to grow your imagination and come up with fresh new ideas. So maybe not necessarily reading within the same genre that you're writing, but something that's related. So for me, I write vampires, witches, shifters, mostly paranormal romance. So when I'm reading to expand my knowledge base, I'll reach for the thriller, the horror, the rom-com. So areas that I don't feel are my expertise is what I reach for to read for professional development, because I can take those elements to create a better, more well-rounded story.
That's a good idea. TJ?
Well, I'm probably more on the boring side of it, because my day job is so demanding that kind of like Stella, I read a lot. I'm a reader before I'm a writer. Reading is what got me interested in writing in the first place. And I don't take classes or any of that kind of stuff. I've been published for 15 years now, and mostly I don't honestly think about it. I do find that as I've written over time, my voice has matured. My writing skills have gotten better, but a lot of that is because I've had some really kick-ass editors. At my publishing houses and stuff like that. They don't play. They're not nice because it's not their job to be nice. Their job is to, if your manuscript isn't already whipped into shape when they get it, their job is to make sure that it's as sparkling and awesome as possible. So my first few editors just they kicked my ass. Oh my God. It was an awesome experience. So even though it was a long time ago, I tend to bring each of those experiences forward with me as I'm writing my next book. So, my brain is tired from day job, and I don't do a lot of what most people would call personal development. So I read and I fall back on my previous experiences, so that the technical parts of my book work. But I'm reading to escape, work and family life and screaming grandchildren and what the heck is going on at my daughter-in-law's house and all of that stuff. I read to escape that. So when I write, I tend to escape that as well. So I'm not as, I don't meditate about it. I don't really go and read. I do read different genres, but I don't really read those genres for the sake of improving my romance writing. I read them just because I want to read them. So I'm kind of boring on the what do you do to get better side.
We only have 3 minutes, so others quickly, so I can try to wrap it up and have everybody know where to find you, Jessica.
Well, I will say I do meditate, and that's just because life is stressful, and I don't want to bring that stress into my work when I'm writing. So I do take a quick 5 minutes and center myself so I can connect better with my characters. I think everything else is the same. I read, I have critique partners, and
Is reading
all
a
that.
craft book, or at least in between. After I finish a book, I read a craft book. I do take classes. I have critique partners. So I'm constantly trying to just learn more and get better. And that's kind of just part of my personality. I love learning about craft, interested in some little new technique that I can learn to improve my writing. And, but critique partners and editors, yeah, TJ, editors have made me such a much better writer. But my freelance editors at my self-pub.
Just to have somebody who's getting paid to look at it and not be your friend to look at it. And that's, they're like, oh, I like this. And your editor is like, what is she thinking? So yeah, editors.
That part.
TA.
I don't have classes or anything like that. I got a lot of craziness going on in my head. Enough to fill a million. If I feel like killing somebody off, then that's my next victim. I've related quite a few people over a lot of times. So it's all in my head.
Well, thank you, everybody. So I just want to say that I am just like loving this black excellence that I have going on, and I can see everybody on the screen, and you guys are all beautiful. And I just want to say we need to keep it up. So quickly, if everybody can just give like their email, not their email, but their website address, so the people can go and look you up.
tjmichaels.com.
Mine is lpenelope.com.
Sorry. I'll go again. JessicaCage.com. Sorry.
It's okay.
Leslie, what's yours? I didn't hear yours all the way.
Oh, lpenelope.com is mine.
Oh, okay. Stella.
Mine is serpentinecreative.com.
Okay. TA.
Well, I got a couple of them. One is studios.com. Another one is thickmomsbooksandmore.com, or just find me on Facebook, facebook.com, MoormanTA.
Okay.
Killemoff.com.
You're right.
That was
Killemoff.com.
gonna be the next one. See,
I don't
get out
care
my
if you.
head.
I don't care if you like this bitch. I'm gonna kill it, Doc. Okay, so as I said at the beginning, I have a POC Authors website, and I just got it just so that people can see that there are people of color that write in these, genres: sci-fi, paranormal, urban fantasy, and fantasy. We're out there. We're great. We're rocking the world, and we're doing our thing. And I have a website that I'm just like struggling to maintain because it's just me. So, but it's www.pocparanormalauthors.com. And we have a Facebook page, and we have a book club where we just try to introduce new people to the books that we write. And I love it. And I was gonna say something else. Jesus, I forget that quick. Oh, that everybody on this panel is on the POC website. So if you want to go out, you just go out and look at the website, and you can see different authors. And if you think I've missed somebody, please email me at POC at
Oh, thank
gmail.com.
you. Thank you. Thank you
So
so much.
thank you,
Yeah, thank
everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All
Thank
right.
you.
Have a good day,
Nice
you
to meet you
guys.
guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.